I didn't get a kimochi to wear. Mine would be thrilled to be here. Thank you very much, Karen Gross and Dr. Davila. I just thumbs up on the selections on your video on those books. Amazing.
Thank you.
I'm Flo Rogers, President and CEO of Nevada Public Radio. Since the inaugural summit on Nevada education in 2015, Nevada Public Radio has been a proud supporter of this event and the UNLV College of Education. Our network of stations now reaches 93% of the population of Nevada, including Reno and Carson City as of this year. Access to high-quality international, national, and local journalism is part of the infrastructure of an informed, educated, and engaged community. And so in this spirit, the College of Education is a natural partner for us. I am pleased to offer and thrilled to offer my congratulations on UNLV's 60th anniversary this year, and we're so honored to support the summit for the third year so we can join you in championing high-quality, innovative education for all of Southern Nevada's children and families. It is my very distinct pleasure to introduce to you our first panel. Their very impressive resumes are contained in your program, so I do hope that you'll spend a little time with them. But as I introduce our panelists, they're going to take the stage for our first discussion. Adam Johnson is the Executive Director for Democracy Prep Public Schools. So if you'd like to come up, Adam. Good morning. Thom Reilly is the Chancellor of Nevada's System of Higher Education. Sean Parker is the Executive Director of Teach for America. Sean's over here. And Pat Skorkowsky is the Superintendent of Clark County School District. And we also welcome Sylvia Lazos, Justice Myron Leavitt Professor of the UNLV William S. Boyd School of Law. Thank you, Pat. I get my happy kimochi, and I will leave you to lead the discussion. Thank you all for investing your own time, energy, and enthusiasm being here today. Thank you.
So my kimochi that I chose was hopeful, because today is a day about hope, of how we can bring about the changes needed in public education to ensure the success of every student in every classroom. And it's exciting to have this amazing panel up here who will be discussing some of the biggest issues that they feel we are facing in education. So I'd love to start with that question, which is, what do you feel are the biggest challenges that we face in public education today? So I don't know who wants to jump in and start, but jump right in.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you for coming here today to this important discussion. And Pat and I have had this conversation now running for about 5 or 6 years in terms of what I think the majority of the practitioners, and by that I'm calling the guys in the trenches, the administrators, the principals, the leaders of every school district in this state, feel that the number one problem is the underfunding of K-12 school finance. And I'm going to pause here so you can clap, because this is definitely a clapping opportunity, right, Sandy Miller? Absolutely. So what happens when you underfund K-12? You have what I would call stop and start innovations. You have some programs that are really fantastic that start off with good funding and good basis, but then you have a budget crisis. And when you have a budget crisis, you don't sit there and say, well, how can I, for example, cut excess fat? Because there is no excess fat. What you start cutting at is muscle. And some of the muscle that we're currently cutting at in terms of CCSD is really painful to watch. A special ed, I definitely think that our English language learner is program is going to be impacted. And let me pause right here, because the ELL program really was born in this university, in these very places that you're walking. We started thinking about reading centers as a way to help our most vulnerable students and also our ELL students back in 2010. And we finally got reading centers instituted through the Zoom program. Now, we still have them. We still have wonderful people here being affected, but when the whole school district is being impacted by these draconian budget cuts, it's really hard to keep your gems above the water when the whole ship is sinking. So it really saddens me, and I mean that quite genuinely and authentically. It really saddens me that we have not paid attention to basic per pupil funding, that instead we have focused on these very promising and flashy kind of programs, but haven't paid attention to what it takes to run a school district. And that's our challenge, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that in 2018, and even during this year leading up to 2018, that you tweet, you talk about it, you write papers on it, you email, you e-blast, whatever it takes to make sure that this is the #1 priority of the 2018 legislative session. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thom, you are going to jump in next.
Well, I'll build upon the comment through K through 12. I mean, obviously, when K through 12 does well, higher education does well. So building upon the comments you made about the funding issue, two of the areas that we struggle with in higher education is one is access. You know, in Nevada, 24% of young people between 18 and 24 go on to higher education, where the national average is close to 40%. We rank 49th. What we know about higher education, and I'm talking broadly between getting a certificate to a PhD, that access to higher education is mobility. And what we've done in Nevada is we've relegated it just to 24% of our population. We have to do more to look at what the barriers, and the barriers are financial, but there are other barriers that are keeping individuals from the access. I mean, it's the #1 indicator of individual success in the United States. And again, we've relegated it to just a quarter of our population in Nevada. The second area is that's only half the battle once we get them in there. We have to do a better job at student success. And those that enter, they get their certificate, they get their AA degree, they get their BA degree. We have to do more to find ways to ensure that when individuals come here, that it's a successful experience.
Sean, Adam?
In terms of building off what you said, Thom, I think both of those points are incredibly important. One of the things that we have to do as K-12 is make sure that before you even get the access, you are actually prepared to be in a university setting and to succeed. So our job is to make sure that we are setting our scholars up for success. You know, we have a graduation rate last year that was in the state that was almost 74%. But we looked at the composite ACT score, it was almost 5 points away from being college ready. And so that means that while, yes, we were sending kids, we were walking them across the stage, and as UNLV had one of its largest classes incoming, how many of those scholars were prepared to be successful in school? And so as a state, we need to make sure that we are aligning our college readiness along with providing the access to those colleges.
And I'm not here to dissent, actually. I think I agree with all of the fellow panelists on the stage. And I would say that when I think about the challenges, sometimes I like to flip that on its head and ask, like, what is the possibility for education in the state of Nevada? And I think the possibility is limitless. We live in a state that has proven time and time again that we can create something purely based off of our imagination, but also based off of the hard work that we put into it. We have created, well, if you look outside this building, a city and a state that is growing faster than any other, that is proving what's possible in gaming and resort and water innovation. And I think if we applied that same level of imagination and collaboration and innovation, we could do the same thing and make our education system the fastest improving in the country. And I think the things that might be limiting us are living in this scarcity society we do when it comes to funding and when it comes to access and opportunity. And to me, I think what we need to focus on is creating more opportunities for kids and setting those opportunities up through rigorous standards. We can't just set up any opportunity. We have to make sure the opportunities we're setting up are the most rigorous in the country and competitive internationally.
And I think based upon your conversation, you know, one of the things, Adam, to your point, the Clark County School District has done is tried to increase capacity of advanced placement, and we've had an extremely successful run of that. But you're all our community partners. We work directly with you on a daily basis most of the time. What is it that your organization is doing to attack these issues head on in education? What are you specifically doing to help address these concerns that you've identified?
Well, let's start again. Educate Nevada Now is powered by the Rogers Foundation, and the Rogers Foundation has been set up to do education philanthropy throughout the state. We have scholarships and grants. We also have small grants for teachers that you can apply to right now. Just go to our website. We fund something called the Core Academy and West Prep, which goes deep to help every single student. And finally, the Rogers Foundation funds Educate Nevada Now. And our sole purpose and focus is to do something about equity in school finance. And what we do is, and I encourage you to go to our website so that you can get some bothersome emails that I hope you don't immediately delete. But our emails are, I think, well thought out, well researched, and document carefully just what the gap is and how important school finance is to the state of Nevada and the future that we are all hoping we will see eventually. And then finally, we have in the past brought litigation. As you know, I'm a lawyer, and I know lawyers are not the most popular people. But down, a couple steps down the way, what we try to teach at the law school is that lawyers are about social justice and understand that the function of law in society is to remind the rest of society about our norms and our values, and to use that law forcefully to say, beyond this marker, you're violating a norm and value which you should never violate. So we have used the law in Lopez versus Schwartz, which was decided about a year and a half ago, or maybe a year and 2 months ago. And in that case, the Supreme Court made probably the most important decision that it has made in the state of Nevada in over 2 decades. And it said quite clearly to the state legislature, I know that you guys like to play fast and easy in terms of claiming success and not really understanding that you're underfunding whatever it is program that you're up to. And these universal school vouchers called the Education Savings Account that are going to funnel monies from public education, you need to lay off that and leave public education monies alone. The court didn't say that we were underfunding, but it said, if you're going to come up with a voucher program, come up with a new pot of money. Don't make Pat Skorkowsky and every school district in the country at every quarter get a bill where they get a little surprise that they're minus 20 million down. And that's what Lopez versus Schwartz decided, and that's what Educate Nevada Now did for the state of Nevada. Thank you.
As I mentioned before, is that we do well in higher education when K through 12 does well, and we are strong partners with K through 12, and are continuing to look at avenues that we can ensure that when young people are graduating and going on to higher education, they're prepared. I mean, so obviously one of the areas we spend a good deal of time, particularly at our community colleges and elsewhere, with remedial education to ensure that those individuals that do not have that skill set to be successful, that we spend time ensuring that happens. We've also, thanks to the legislature and the governor's office, have been big advocates and participate in the dual enrollment program, in the Jump Start program. What we do know is the research is very clear. Those young people that participate do better. They're more likely to graduate, and they do better in issues of higher education. And again, thanks to the legislature, I saw Senator Woodhouse in the audience too. Building upon the Millennial Program, building upon the Silver State Scholarship Program was Nevada Promise, which has just tremendous possibilities. The enrollment in that program, it's a last resort program. It was targeted for the high school graduates in 2018. Over 12,000 young people signed up for that program. We do need mentors, so if you have not signed up as a mentor, this is a call out. It's incredibly important. We know the research on mentorship, right? How incredibly important that is. This program requires it. So those young people that signed up for the program have to do community service, and they have to have a mentor assigned to them. So please, if you have not done that, contact CSN. We need more programs that partner higher education with our K through 12 partners to ensure that we're targeting young people, we're giving them the hope, we're talking to them about the possibilities to go on to higher education, even if they never thought it was possible.
So I am the executive director at Democracy Prep Public Charter Schools. We're a new charter school to Nevada. We opened up our doors on July 1st this year. We are formally Andre Agassi College Preparatory Academy. And so we are a network of schools, and so we are bringing our model of college preparedness here to the state of Nevada. And I'm excited because it has not been easy to make sure that we are providing access to every single scholar. So we want to make sure that the rigorous college prep education is accessible to all scholars. And so I know we are at this point a single K-12 school, but my goal is to make sure that we're thinking about how do we better partner with all of the schools in our West Las Vegas and North Las Vegas community. We service a lot of the same students, whether they are in the same house or they are siblings or they're cousins. And so the strategies that we have to use to provide access to college prep curriculum can be the same for all of the schools in the 89106 and 89031 area codes. And so for me, I think what we are doing is actually actively reaching out to try to figure out how do we best partner with schools who have scholars who have some of the same challenges that we have, who are dealing with abject poverty, who are dealing with trauma on a daily basis, and not lowering those expectations for our scholars, understanding that those challenges exist, and still saying you can reach this incredibly high bar, but we have to structure our school in such a way so whether we provide classes on Saturdays, we have extra tutoring, we have tutoring in the morning, we have homework, all of these additional structures in place to provide scholars the supports they need to access the college prep curriculum so that when we are competing against not just the best scholars in the state of Nevada, but against other scholars across the country, they're prepared, and we've provided the social emotional supports so that they can make sure they have their full needs met. So as a school, it's not just about making sure that you have the rigorous curriculum, but you're also providing additional supports and then reaching out to your community partners, other schools, and making sure that the things that you're doing are open source. So we're doing a lot of listening, we're doing a lot of learning, but we're making sure that the college curriculum is accessible to all.
And I'll say, at Teach for America, we believe that there is a future in our country, that one day all kids will have access to an equitable and excellent education. That's just like fundamentally what we have to work for. And I am a first-generation American, and my parents lost everything in their country because of a revolution that happened there. And the one thing they didn't lose was their education. You can't take that away from them. And they instilled that belief in me growing up that no matter what happens, you have to have a strong education because nothing can be taken away from you, or everything can be taken away from you except for that. And so I joined this organization because I recognize, alongside so many others, that there are certain things in our system that our panelists are naming that are broken right now. It is not working for every kid, and every kid does not have access to an equitable and excellent education. And that's fundamentally against this idea of the American dream, that if you try hard, you work hard, that you can succeed. Because we have kids who try hard, who work hard, and yet make it all the way through high school, if they do make it through high school, and aren't ready and prepared for the workforce of the future. And so what we're trying to do at Teach for America is we are, at our core, a recruitment and leadership development organization. There are tremendous people working in education already. Many of the people in this audience, my fellow colleagues on the panel, are already doing amazing things in education. And at Teach for America, we want to amplify that by recruiting more leaders who believe that every kid can achieve and who want to make that a reality of the future, whether that's in pre-K through 12 education or in the colleges or in other organizations that are amplifying the work for kids. And so I see us continuing to do that and trying to bring in the greatest leaders and develop the greatest leaders here in Nevada.
So each of you talked about ways that your individual organization is trying to better public education in the state of Nevada. One of the challenges that we face every 2 years during our legislative session is that we don't necessarily go in with a unified agenda. So how can we, as collaborative partners, and with all of these people here in this room, how can we start collaborating more to make sure that we are unified when we walk in the door at the beginning of that 2019 legislative session?
That's a great question, Pat, and I think the university, and since we are here as your guest, plays a major role in that challenge. First of all, research, data, and investigation in ways that are accessible to the normal person, and Thom Reilly perhaps can speak to that. He did a tremendous job at University of Arizona in terms of making sure that the university led in identifying problems and providing data. I think that the second thing that we can do is really learn the timeline of the legislature and not work according to our own timeline. I am myself a spoiled tenure full professor, and I know that when you are a spoiled tenure full professor, you can pretty much work on your own timeline and your own projects. But folks, we need to get out of that bubble if we want to be relevant. The legislature meets for 4 months during the year. This is a major state, every other year, and they are expected to solve a plethora of problems in 4 months. That is not doable. That means that those problems have to be raised, discussed, and solved prior to legislative session, and we will have the Interim Education Committee, on which Joyce Woodhouse is going to be sitting on, discussing some of these issues. Participate, talk to Joyce Woodhouse about what issues she's working on and interested in. Senator Mo Dennis, who is not here today, is also very accessible. So I would say that the other thing that we can realize is just how accessible our legislative government is. You can have lunch. Senator Woodhouse, I'm going to encourage people to come over and just drown you out with enthusiasm. But you can have direct communication in this state. I talked to a student of mine who went to California to intern, and he said, Professor Lazos, you won't believe this. Normal people in California can't ever talk to their legislators because there's like 2 tiers of staff that you have to go through and convince that what you're talking about is important. Here in Nevada, it is a true citizen government-led organization, and you can talk directly to your legislators, you can make an impact, and I beg you, we have so many problems in Nevada that require your energy, your good faith, your intellect, your students to focus on, that we get on this right away. And I know that Chancellor Reilly will agree with me, and that's how I'm going to shift over to him.
Oh, I know if I did,
Go
I'd be in
ahead,
trouble.
Skip.
But I would echo all that. A couple of things. One is from the university perspective. We can provide the research, the evidence-based programs at work, and present those to the legislature, because it's not any great secret of what programs actually work to increase success, to increase access. But we also have to do a better job with K through 12 and universities as far as coordinating our legislative agenda. To your point is that we're a small state. We do have access to legislators, and I would venture to say legislators want us to coordinate our strategies better. So we need to do a much better job. For example, one is currently right now we have a representative on the Board of Education. But we don't have a reciprocal relationship of someone on the Board of Education sitting with our Board of Regents. That's just one example which we can start coordinating our shared interest in programming. But having those legislative strategies beforehand, having them backed up with evidence-based research, there's no reason we're not going to do that. And I'm definitely committed to moving forward in that direction.
And I think one of the things, I agree completely, Pat, with the premise of the question, which is collaboration is key. In education, we talk a lot about how it takes a village to raise a child. And then we don't always take the same approach at the level of leadership that you're talking about. And I have seen it done well in the past, though, in our state. I know that in the proposal to adopt our ESSA regulations, Steve Canavero, Dina Durish, people from the State Department of Education gathered key stakeholders together to say, like, what do we want to be true together at the state level? What do we want to be true for kids? What is the framework that we're going to create to make that happen? And I think that it's not just about the legislative session, it's about the regulations we put in place. It's about the day-to-day things that we do in schools, and that we have to keep each other in our own minds when we're doing the things that each of our organizations are doing.
I think, and just to add to that a little bit, I can't say it any more perfectly than you all have already laid it out. Just something tangible. What is our 3 or 5 year plan? That allows for us to tick off benchmarks along the way. Just like any large-scale corporation has its strategic plan that it creates. Obviously you have to evolve as tides change. But if we are thinking about that, what is that? Get key stakeholders in the room, create this strategic plan, and then you have the levers to pull as you move forward. I think that's one of the things that we can think about.
Pat, could I just, that opening there I didn't want to miss too. One thing that I've been working with the Board of Regents is identifying those 5 clear, strategic, high-level goals that will move the needle in higher education. We've been talking about that a lot today. One is the whole issue of access, increasing that, and measuring it. The issue of student success, closing the achievement gap between unrepresented groups, meeting the workforce needs and dealing with research, and developing some clear metrics on success, having each of our institutions look at peer and aspirational institutions. So CSN is comparing itself not to UNR, which is totally meaningless, but to actually other urban, ethnically based communities where you can actually measure some of those and then actually determine, based upon those metrics, why aren't we meeting those certain metrics and what is occurring. We're actually having a public forum over at the office right across the street today at 4. We've been talking for the last couple months about these goals. Are they aligned? Are they the right goals to move the needle? And I definitely continue to welcome input on those and suggestions as we move forward.
Well, and I think each one of you have talked about things that you're working on and things that are doing. But if you could use your forecasting crystal ball, whatever you want to look at, roll the dice and see what comes up. But in 5 years, what should public education look like in the state of Nevada, and what can your organization do to help us get there?
Well, I'm glad that Adam and both Thom brought up the issue of access and diversity. So I'm going to use the word diversity, which I actually loathe because it's such an undefined term. It is so plastic, and yet it is so important that we think and put diversity first. There are actually still people in senior positions that when you talk about diversity, they can't help but let an eye roll out as you're trying to make a point that is extremely important. Why is diversity so important? We live in a state where our K through 18 population looks completely different from our 50-plus population. What color, folks, is the K through 12 population? Brown, 48%, and black, and Asian. Caucasians make only 33% of your K through 12 population. When you switch over to higher ed, and I think Thom has kind of talked a little bit about it, it's not the same. You still have a dominant Caucasian population. That means that you have a very leaky pipeline going from K through 12 to higher ed. The people who are making decisions in this state are over 50. Unlike my son, they are not growing up in a multicultural environment. They're not growing up with other people of privilege who can understand that people of color are talented, can be leaders. So where I want this organization, the university, and my own organization to go is to be looking at a system where we don't have to continue to raise the issue of diversity and that there are no longer any eye rollers in the room when you use the term diversity.
Yeah, clap. Sylvia, I couldn't agree more. I think too often our system is structured in a way that limits the advancement and opportunities of people of color and people from low-income backgrounds. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I think 5 years from now, Pat, some of the work that you and the Clark County School District have already started to undergo, the advancements in career and technical education, the increase in magnet schools, the increase in AP schools, and the new direction of becoming an autonomous school district. I know it's still undergoing. My hope is that 5 years from now, we're going to see some more examples of tremendously excellent schools, not just in those schools that I mentioned before, but in traditional public schools, traditional charter schools, whatever it might be, or public charter schools, traditional schools, that are in the low-income communities, communities of color, that are far exceeding the outcomes that they currently are. And I think that is possible in 5 years. We've seen it done in other communities. When we look at communities across the country that have seen the most rapid increases in educational advancement, whether that is in Washington, D.C., Denver, New Orleans, we have seen some pretty rapid advances for kids in underserved communities. And I hope that Teach for America's role in all of this is partnering with others who are doing it. There are others already doing this work, the National Board Certification Program, the Clark County School District, your organization, higher ed, the schools themselves. And I hope what we are doing is continuing to develop leaders who can fill in those roles or create those schools if they don't exist today.
And because I don't want to step on you, you're going to have a really great point to close us out, and I don't want to follow that. I think one of the things that I hope for our schools as we think about 5 years from now is being able to be nimble, right? You have to be able to be innovative and shift. How do you create schools? And a lot of what we're doing at Democracy Prep now is to try to figure out how do we have lots of people, lots of thought partners so that we can try things, we can be innovative, and we can continue to evolve as fast as our kids are learning. And so my hope is that as we start to allow our schools more autonomy, they have the ability to really be risk takers and put out the types of scholars who can think differently, who are able to shift when things shift. And so we have to have teachers who are able to do those same things. And so a lot of what we're doing on our campus is really trying to put a lot of empowerment into our teachers and our scholars to be able to think critically and see kind of around corners. And that comes from leaders who are willing to let them take risks and leaders who themselves are willing to take risks and not afraid of failing, but learning from the failures, but also being purposeful with your risk taking.
I'm just going to build upon what everybody said. And we start with the issue of diversity. We are now in higher education in Nevada a majority-minority enrollment system. And, you know, that is just due to demographics. It's wonderful, but it wasn't any great achievement on our half. It's just that's the way the demographics of the state. That's why I've really focused on one of our goals is closing the achievement gap, is that we need to have laser focus of doing that. Now, one of the other goals we have on the issue of research, and it's twofold. One is that we are the largest populated state in the United States without an R1 research institute. We're the largest populated state in the whole United States without an R1 research. Our quest and our movement, and we're very close of moving towards this, for an R1 institution is that we will do that. And we were judged a success by who we're including and not who we're excluding. So the whole issue of access is that they're simultaneous goals, that we include access to all of our institutions and push that. At the same time, we move towards quality. At the same time, we move towards becoming a research institution. But we don't do it by excluding individuals. So what I want to see us in 5 years is actually moving those needles there, but we're not doing that at the expense of excluding individuals and excluding social mobility and access in our community, in our state.
No, we actually got more time, so I'm throwing more questions out. These are questions that you don't know, though, so here we go. This is the fun part. I think one of the challenges that we face in public education today has to do with data, and it has to do with accountability, and it has to do with measurement. Because, Adam, you just talked about a word where we have risk takers and we have creative thinkers and students that are going to solve problems. Yet the most difficult challenge we face in public education is how do we measure that in an accountability system? So how do you, as individuals or as an organization or as a group, bring some levity to that, because the data doesn't always tell the story of what that individual student has to do. So how do we change that mindset so that we still are accountable for every dollar that we receive, but also are creating those students who truly will go out and change the world?
Well, as you know, I'm a lawyer, and lawyers don't do very good with math. In fact, they're very kind of simplistic about math. That's why they don't go on to business school. They go to the law school when they find that their GMATs are terrible in math. But it's simplistically for me as a lawyer and someone who thinks about litigation and civil rights, is that if we spent $20 million or $100 million in a Zoom school program, we need to see growth in the kids that are being targeted with that money. If I give Thom $100 million and it's to close the achievement gap, at the end of 2 years, at the next biennial session, I want to see some progress in closing the achievement gap. So I think we need to be relentless in terms of, as being a state and being taxpayers, that yes, we want more money into public education, but we want accountability from leadership. We want accountability from Pat, and we want accountability from Thom. And if his leadership and his staff are unable to make gains in those particular student populations, then there should be consequences, right? Like, I'm a mom and I always talk about consequences. I'm not specifying what kind of consequences, but we need to have those kinds of public discussions, and we cannot let go of a single bit of determination in that has to happen. That's the way the state gets better, and that's the way we get people to believe in public education.
I'm going to say here to that, because on this issue of those goals, what I'm asking at each of our board meetings now going forward is that we focus on the metrics of those core areas that are going to move the needle, that we put in front of us at every meeting, and as a litmus test of what we should be discussing at these meetings are these issues. We should be spending the majority of our time when we get our elected officials together and staff together about these core issues and moving the needle. And if we're not moving the needle in access, in student success, in closing the achievement gap, in meeting the workforce needs, and actually doing research that solves problems, that's why we do it. It's not just a theoretical exercise. We do research to solve community problems, and we need to define what those are. We need to discuss that all the time, and we need to be held accountable. And if we're not doing that, we need, it's also an entree to discussing why we're not doing it. And sometimes there's really good reasons that students aren't successful. It's a funding issue. It's whether there's counselors, whether there's remedial education. It allows us that public conversation that's very important.
I think I'll ask the audience, if you can remember a time in the last year when you celebrated failure, raise your hand. There's a few of you. I think that question is one that I've been asking myself lately, which is the idea that, am I using failure as an opportunity to learn and celebrating that opportunity? Because if we're not failing at something, we're not innovating and we're not taking risks. Because if you are taking risks and innovating, there will be failures along the way. And I know that, you know that. When I studied science in college, I was a neuroscience major. Half of what I was doing in that research lab was failing. We were learning nothing, and then from learning nothing, we were learning a lot about how we were doing that. And so it took me to when I was a teacher, and for those of you who are teachers or who have been teachers in the classroom, you know that there is accountability and then there's micromanaging. And I think those are sometimes used interchangeably, and those are very different. I had accountability as a teacher. I taught in California, and I knew that I would be held accountable to the way that my students performed on that end-of-year test in biology and math. That wasn't a question to me. But it didn't lead me to say that I'm going to teach them how to take a test. Because if I taught them how to take a test, and if I didn't take any risks in that class, they would have probably actually not done well on that end-of-year assessment. And I think that spirit of flexibility that my school provided me to try things and to fail, and then say it's okay that you failed, that your kids did not learn this one lesson today, that gave me the ability to change the very next day, the next week, the next month, and grow as an educator and leader. And I also had support along the way from my coaches through Teach for America, through my district, that enabled me to do that. And I think the question isn't just how do we find the right balance, but how do we do both at the same time? Hold our system accountable to what matters at the absolute bar, Every kid in Las Vegas, every kid in Nevada should have access to an equitable and excellent education. They should be getting the same scores regardless of their background or economic status on those state tests. They should have the same opportunity to go to college or get a career in a field that they want. And we shouldn't hamstring our teachers by saying that you have to do it this way. Because our teachers are leaders, innovators, they are the CEOs of their classroom, and you would never micromanage a CEO of a company.
I don't think I could have said it any better. I love the thought of how do we make sure that our teachers have the resources that they need to be able to be as innovative as they need. So not just the material resources, but the mental resources as well. So are we providing our teachers the training they need to be able to think differently about how to analyze data, how to look at a midterm exam and go question by question, what did I do on this question to make sure that 73% of my class got it right? And what did I do so that the other percentage did not get it correct? And so when you are diving into data that deeply and really looking at what am I doing, what is it my practice, and then how do I get the coaching that I need to really make sure that I'm providing the type of lesson plans or really going in every day and getting the intellectual prep on every lesson to make sure that I'm able to differentiate these lessons for a wide variety of student skills, understanding that the bar is never going to move, but I have to make sure that all of our kids are getting there. So it's the resources that we provide and the preparation that we help provide our teachers as they are thinking about what do I need to do to make sure I'm getting every single one of my scholars along the way.
So last thoughts, 30-second elevator speech, okay? 30 seconds. I'm keeping you to 30 seconds here. What is the one thing from your perspective that all of these participants need to walk away from when it comes to public education?
Public education can be fixed if we focus, if we work together, and if we give our teachers the opportunity to succeed with adequate funding.
This time you're not going to go first, huh? I see how it is. With the 30 seconds. I'd say that I think every single person in this room, my ask is actually that we all go and visit our public pre-K through 12 school system more often. Because when we're in the schools and when we're seeing what's happening, we're more proximate to the situation. And there's so much excellence that's already happening. And I think the work ahead of us is actually just accelerating that excellence and diminishing some of the problems that we do see by accelerating those who are doing things well and getting more funding so that those things can accelerate.
I would add to those two excellent comments, too, is that ensuring that we have the private sector and the business community that are partners with us and arguing and demanding from our legislature and demanding from our society that we invest in education and invest in a better Nevada.
I think I'll close it out by saying that it is all of our jobs to make sure that we hold all of our scholars accountable. We know that they can. All right. If you don't believe that children can achieve, then they've already have a limit on them. And so our job is to never bring the bar down, is to make sure that we know what the highest achieving scholar in any state can do, and then we say our scholars can do that too and more. And so your job is to make sure that you are helping schools figure out how do we make sure we keep that bar high no matter what, and we never allow for excuses to come into the picture. And we do what we need to do to provide all of the resources and access to those things, but our bar never comes down.
Excellent job. Please give the panel a great round of applause. I'm fortunate enough to get to work with these amazing people on a daily basis, and all of you in the room that I work with. Thank you so much for your commitment to our students in public education because, as I've always said, it's about every student in every classroom without exceptions and without excuses. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Pat.